Okay, chat, say
Because,
hi to YouTube.
Let's talk to YouTube. All right, cool. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go through a bit of a history of Phantasy Star Games, because recently, as you guys know, whenever any game goes into any bit of a funk anywhere ever, and I say this as someone who loves the MMO community, has been a part of it for so long, everyone likes to talk about their wild takes of why something isn't this anymore, or why something isn't that anymore, right? So one that Skull's got that has never been said to me, because I probably would immediately just laugh at this person. And if you said it, I mean, no disrespect to you, maybe you haven't played enough of it, or maybe you just didn't put things together the same way, but that NGS doesn't feel like a Phantasy Star game.
Yes, and I hear this so often, that people have told me since the beginning that even if they like NGS, it doesn't feel like a real Phantasy Star game. And I don't know what that means. I have absolutely no clue what that means. And I told Krono, and he was like, what? So I want to know.
Yeah, so she was like, yeah, they told you it doesn't feel like a Phantasy Star game. I'm like, does it not feel like one now? Like, no, it didn't feel like one when NGS came out. And that hurt my head to understand, because if you've played enough Phantasy Star, you know that it has been wildly different generation to generation. So that's what we're going to go over today, is we're going to check out the different versions of Phantasy Star.
Yes, I want to know what makes it. I want to know what makes it a real Phantasy Star game. Like, what makes a Phantasy Star game a Phantasy Star game? Like, what do they mean when they tell me this? Because, like, I enjoy NGS, but that's all I know. I don't really know much else about any other Phantasy Star game. And
yeah, like, you didn't play in base or anything earlier than that. Yeah, like, you started in NGS, right?
I played a little bit of base, but it was just me being confused and just in the casino. So I don't think the casino taught me very much.
All right, so going way, way back, we're starting at the very, very beginning of Phantasy Star Games. I'm ready. Probably going to make some people mad. It was very much just another RPG back in the day. There were some interesting things that Phantasy Star Games did. I'm not going to play the audio from this. It's like a documentary. We'll leave links in the video description for you guys to check out all these different videos. I'll make sure to save them all. But what we're looking at from this video is more about the just like the graphics of the game itself and how the gameplay worked. So way back, if you guys remember the original Final Fantasy games, which, funny enough for that series, at the time, the studio, which was it Squaresoft back then? I believe Squaresoft, was basically going out of business. And their last game was made in a way that it wasn't intended to have any sequels, which is what Phantasy Star games became. Not Phantasy Star, I'm sorry, Final Fantasy games became. Phantasy Star looked very similar. While the sprite work was different, the actual gameplay looked mostly similar. The most Phantasy Star you can be is Dark Falls, and that's Dark Falls back in the original Phantasy Star.
It does remind me of a Final Fantasy game.
It really
or just
was
that area, the era of RPGs.
Yeah, it was very much very equivalent of the standard, like, attack, item, use magic or skill, run. Talk was kind of like more of a thing that you would see in Persona or Shin Megami Tensei. That wasn't something you would see in a lot of different games, but like, this was the battle screen. It was just the enemy in your face. There was no characters on screen. You didn't see them or anything along those lines. And of course you had the usual spells and skills, but you didn't really there wasn't any action combat involved. This was like the overworld. This is walking around. And I mean, I'm sure if you guys remember old Final Fantasy, different. Actually, remember any old RPG, it's not that different.
Yeah, same vibe.
This is just the same vibe you would have from any any game. Now, where they did things a little bit different, so this was like, just a standard battle or whatever. Of course, you're fighting just the enemy on screen. The one thing that was kind of unique to Phantasy Star at the time were these dungeons. And they would do like a first-person view of the dungeon path that you would actually go through and walk through it. And this was kind of mostly it. They didn't look that different or that special. I wasn't saying any other game really didn't do this, but like, this was kind of like the unique thing that Phantasy Star did at the time. And that was mostly it. Everything else unique about it was mostly the story. It was the idea that falls always showed up every 1,000 years. It was more of like a force of nature and less of like an actual evil entity. And that was mostly all there was to it. Like, again, there are other nuances that I'm sure people who are like really, really big Phantasy Star buffs would want to go into, and we could talk about those all day long. But when you really boil it down, it was just a turn-based first-person RPG.
So like the false take, I've heard quite a bit too. So that one, that's legit. That's pretty valid, right? That they only involve false. Okay.
Right. And we'll come back to the whole false thing and why there is one leg to stand on. Like when as far and the female main character, yes, that was not a very common thing at the time. Female main character or female leads were not very common in this style of RPG at the time. Yeah. So that was something unique that Phantasy Star did at the time. That was, it was cool. It was progressive. It was awesome. The way the spells worked were also slightly different as well, but those evolved even further going into the later Phantasy Star games. But overall, when it came down to it, those were that was mostly it for a majority of players that are playing Phantasy Star games now. I would say for most people who even have that mindset of this isn't Phantasy Star, probably never really touched the original Phantasy Star games, which is fine. Okay. They're very, very old. They're very, very old.
It makes sense.
And there were, oh God, Chad, you're gonna have to correct me on this one. I believe there were 3 of these. I want to say 4, either 3 or 4. I can't remember the exact number, but they're definitely old games, and they weren't vastly different. The one thing I say was also unique at the time was did you ever play any Star Ocean? Did you ever see anything like Xenosaga, anything like that? Okay. So it was one of the few games that gave the setting of what looked like complete fantasy, but also mixed in robots.
I need PP. Okay.
Its casts were still prevalent and still existed, and it almost looked like it shouldn't be that progressive with technology, but then it was. Almost like what Final Fantasy game was that? Oh, there was a specific Final Fantasy game where they ended up going into a starship in a sense. But regardless, even then, it was something that wasn't really something you would see too often.
Yeah, I see. Okay. No, you're right. It usually was more of a futuristic aesthetic or fully into fantasy.
Yeah, it didn't really cross over very much.
Yeah, or not that distinctive. Maybe slight things that are futuristic in a fantasy game, but it was never disruptive to the aesthetic.
Right. So the concept of the types of spells, the concept of dark falls, the concept of I wouldn't even say photons at this point, wasn't really established then. It was mostly those concepts that would carry over. And then I'm going to jump forward a little bit. Phantasy Star Online. Now,
oh my God.
Scary some people. I chose something that was a bit more in theme, since you're going to be terrifying me later.
I was going to say, is this you getting me first?
So a player that just has their creepy looking character. I'm pretty sure this is from one of the private servers. The games aren't up anymore. You can't really play them like that anymore.
Hey, look, it's
but this
Krono.
is Phantasy Star Online or Blue Burst. So I could have gotten footage from Phantasy Star Online 1 and then 2 and then Blue Burst, but what you're going to find is that it mostly looks the same. What changed a lot was the story, mostly in this situation.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. So I've played Blue Burst, so I'm familiar with Blue Burst.
So what we're mostly kind of working for is the systems here and kind of how the game played. And this is one of the few times, this is when things started to move more into an action-based combat. Now, I will say, this is not the UI that they use by base. Most people who are playing Blue Burst, they have edited or changed something along the lines when it comes to their UI. So apologies, this isn't the original. But what you're getting from it is mostly the combat. It's very, very one-dimensional. You're just using a weapon, you have an attack, you have some spells you can use occasionally, you can swap out gear and weapons. The enemies, you'll find that they're not insanely fast. They can kind of be stun locked out a little bit sometimes. And when you're looking at the different types of attacks, I mean, you can see this person is literally only pressing, shoot. Has gun, press shoot. Very straightforward. A big thing you can also tell if I pop, or I'll wait for them to go through this load screen. You can see in the very top, okay, another cutscene, get out of my way. Well, I guess we can see this thing land. And how not amazing the textures for the enemies looked back then. But you can see in the top left-hand corner, you see, of course, anyone can tell that Shift and D band, very simple. but you'll see that it's HP and TP, or technique points.
Okay, I see.
Mm-hmm. So at the time, casts didn't have technique points. They couldn't cast techs. It wasn't your class, it was your race choice that actually made it so you couldn't actually use certain things.
Yeah, I noticed that when I played. I thought that was very interesting that like certain like classes, I guess, were just like tied to the race that you picked.
Right. And it kind of limited the player a little bit more. And it wasn't a terrible thing. It's just it was just how it was set up, right? Like your races and your classes just directly tied together was a very common thing at the time. But again, there's not a whole lot here that's different. Where if you look at this, you don't really see the original Phantasy Star very much. What you see is a very different system, very different combat, very different weapons, and of course things are going to evolve over time. No doubt, right? So from there, we move into the next evolution, where you would think we'd go towards a little bit more modern, but we made a hard shift in what Phantasy Star was.
So wait, hold on. Before you go forward. So I didn't really think about this when I played Blueburst, because like when I played was during a subathon, like the only thing I played was NGS, so it was way different. But was like the concept of dungeons really big in the first game that you showed me? Because you showed me the like first person looking dungeons. Was that like a big thing? Because like dungeon type of content seemed to be the entirety of this game, dungeon style content.
Yeah, so the concept of dungeons or instance-based content is very normalized from the online series forward. Back in Phantasy Star like 1, 2, 3, and 4, there were dungeons, and they were, like kind of a really cool thing, but they weren't like the entire concept of the game. Like basically all of the combat happens in dungeon-like areas, like instance-based areas. Oh. But the actual, like the entire game itself, like Phantasy Star 1, 2, 3, and 4 were like so far, they were just very much just fantasy games. Where this was more of the online-based game itself. But the instance-based combat, like you're going to see that's going to be a consistent thing. If you look at the map in the top right-hand corner, just keep an eye on that. You'll see that happen more and more. And Yarkuma, we're aware it's not the original skin, of course. I just wanted to get. This was one of the better videos of what I could find that looked really nice, and that kind of fit the theme we were going for today. So pretty cool. But yeah, instance and dungeons and that sort of thing. That's very, very, very normalized moving forward.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I noticed, because like that's what I enjoyed about Blueburst, and like I feel like the little bit of base game that I played, that's kind of how it like felt too.
It very much was. However, I'm glad you asked that question, because now we're going to take everything you know and throw it out the window.
Okay, cool, great. I love learning.
So now we have. You ever know that there's Phantasy Star Online 1 and then Phantasy Star Online 2, and then there's suddenly Blueburst? There's a Phantasy Star Online 3.
Wait, hold on. So I thought Blueburst was like Phantasy Star Online 1. It was just like its own thing? It
kind of went in an order of sense. Like you had episode 1 and then episode 2. And then we pretend that there's this child no one talks about that we're going to look at in a moment. And then there was Blueburst.
Oh.
So
this is 3?
This is 3. Okay. Now, everything I told you about Phantasy Star, throw it away. Okay. The only thing that's going to stay right now, is the concept of classes and the concept of the enemies you're fighting. Phantasy Star Online Episode 3 was a card game. I don't know why it was a card game. I think card games were popular around that time, and they're like, we should make a card game.
Oh, no. That mistake everyone made around this time.
Because you even see that the main character right here. So if you played a lot of online 1 and 2, that's just the standard human hunter like look.
Yeah.
That's Humar, right? That's just Humar. That's just their normal thing. However,
Humar.
When you get to actual combat, so let's pop over to the first fight. It vastly changes on what you actually do. The controls aren't the same anymore. Like, this is almost as drastic as going from Phantasy Star 1, 2, 3, and 4 to online. And this is supposed to be a part of online's family. So this is within the same generation. It almost feels like if you ever played like Disgaea or those games, it feels closer to that, but with cards mixed in. Almost like if you were to take Kingdom Hearts' card game system that they had, they threw that into combat. Thinking a card-based system and tossing it into like Disgaea's combat.
Oh,
like this is the actual combat. There's no concept of equipping a weapon anymore.
Oh,
there's no concept of equipping armor.
Okay, when you said a card game, I thought you meant like a card game, but it's one of these. Oh my, yeah. So, okay, when was this game made? I said around that time, and I think I know what time, because like there were so many games that ended up being like this. That were either brand new things.
So this video
like,
is from. So 2003.
2003. Okay,
so
yeah, that sounds about right.
About 20 years old.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And this was episode 3. And episode 3 also, funny enough, is it didn't have a bad story. Also, hang on, can you hear the hang on? The announcer in the background was the best. Bro, change. Like, it was so weird. It was. But yeah, this is what you did. I'm gonna just turn the volume here.
Defense.
Like, everything was through cards.
I see.
No concept of weapons, no concept of any of that stuff. Like, the weapons were your cards.
Okay, the fact that everything's random is a little bit different. Because, like, I've played games that have, like, the cards combat, but, like... Also, side note, I need the announcer to be my Siri voiceover.
Yeah, so it's very much something that continued. Weird. And the funny thing is then, so take the concept of 1 and then 2, and then episode 3 came out and this happened, and then Blue Burst. So they knew this didn't work and went back. So keep all of that in mind when we're looking at things,
they
right?
Went
so
back?
now,
I thought you meant to this. I was like, oh no.
No, not to this, because Blue Burst came after.
Okay,
this is episode 1, 2, 3, and then Blue Burst, right? And this is Blue Burst. Like we saw this 1, 2 fairly similar, 3 vastly different, Blue Burst back to being fairly similar. So
I see.
Maybe this was the Pokemon card craze or the Yu-Gi-Oh craze or whatever it happened to be, but like they mixed in dice, they mixed in tabletop, they mixed in
the
cards,
dice too. Oh no.
Yeah, like you roll at the start of each of those turns. Like you're rolling.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah. That
happens in the top left. That happens over here is like the roll. Like you roll for your initial initiative, you roll for like your turns and all that stuff. Like the random aspect is insane.
I see. Yeah, I feel like a lot of games went through this phase. They kind of like went through like either just like a straight card game phase, which to me made more sense to do, or they went into the card based combat. Like, what is it? Batten Kratos something. I don't remember what game it was. Never mind. It was a GameCube game. I can't think of the name of it. I'm not going to butcher it.
I'm not sure what you're referring to be honest. But, but yeah, so this happened, right? I mean, the concept of rappies existed, of course. The overall feel of the game, like it still looks like Phantasy Star, right? Like if you didn't tell someone this is Phantasy Star and they look back at like, online and then looked at this, if they weren't thinking of the combat, they would see this. Like if it was a screenshot, like if you took the screenshot and you removed the like all this from here and you removed that little like that thing there, it would just look like Phantasy Star and that's it. But it was very different. Very different. Oh, okay. They figured out bottom Titus. Okay.
Yeah. It kind of had like card-based combat. It was kind of weird.
Yeah, so it's very, very different. And the cool thing again, the one thing that kind of stayed consistent was the story, the overarching like feel of a problem, arcs have to go out to solve it, dealing with the the nature of like different planets, dealing with dark falls at some point because they always showed up. That all stayed. So moving forward, we went on to what I started with. This is like my baby when it came to it. PSU. So Phantasy Star
Everyone
Universe.
talks so good about PSU who played it. Everyone, every single person. I've never heard a single bad thing about PSU. So I want to know.
Okay. So they're speaking through rose-tinted glasses. It got good. It was a lot of fun to play. Don't get me wrong. And at the time, when it came to like online games, this was great. Like you see, cut-ins are a thing. Chat's a thing. Like this is very Phantasy Star-esque. That was a lobby that you went into. You went into a mission. Wait, they had
cut-ins back then? I thought them having cut-ins for like base game was beyond their time, like before their time. Like, that is insane. But wow,
these are other players. I believe this is on Clementine.
Yeah, so. That is wild. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And you can see here you have the two races. I believe this is that supposed? I think it's supposed to be a beast, but it also looks like Newman ears. I'm not sure exactly. That's obviously a cast. That's not hard to figure out. So this is just a random mission. So they were in a lobby. They went into mission. You can see they select a mission. You can see something that this is what blows my mind when people complain about like Phantasy Star Games never used to do this, guys. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 versions of the same mission. 8 that scaled up every single time. It's not new. This is not a new thing.
Really?
Phantasy Star Games have done this. They've done it for a very long time. Every time a new level cap came out, a new thing came, they gave you a new version. It's the same mission. Sometimes there were slight differences in like the enemy version, like a version of that enemy, right? Like an evolved version of it at a higher level. But mostly it was the same thing. The drops would change.
Oh.
The ability for them to drop higher tier stuff would change.
But
this is not new. Like, not new at all. And like, yeah, a lot of times it was a version 3 reskin. I can tell you as someone, this is going to sound crazy for anyone who doesn't know the names of enemies from PSU, but there are Koltova that exist. They're basically the equivalent of the PSU boar. And there is a fire Koltova, and there is an ice Koltova, and there is a regular Koltova, and then there's like a lightning Koltova I've seen, and then there's a giant Koltova, which is a Distova, and there's a fire Distova, and there's an ice Distova. This is not a new concept.
Those are words.
This is not a new concept. This is what Phantasy Star has done for a very, 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 very long time. We're not going to talk about Koltova milk. Y'all stop drinking the milk. Leave it alone. And
how
honestly,
are we already on milk?
At the time, we loved it. It was something that we accepted.
The milk?
Like we saw different. No.
Okay,
people
I'm sorry.
Like in the Phantasy Star universe story, people like Koltova milk. Yes. It was the equivalent of like cow milk or basically whatever.
Okay. I was like, is this like some kind of pink? Like
no. It was like that equivalent for them. Like these are creatures in the actual overall world, right? But so this is them going into a mission. This is Lightning Beast, right? And what you'll find is a lot of very similar elements. So this is the first time they took photon points into account. And does he actually? Okay, hold on. Give me a sec. Am I going to use a different? Okay, I think I might use.
What's wrong?
Use milk. Yeah.
Milk?
This person.
Dang it! All I keep hearing is milk. I'm sorry. Continue.
We're using Mill's video. Mill played on
JP.
He played on JP back like while the game was active. That person's playing on what's it called? Okay. They're playing on Clementine, which you're able to mod in certain things on Clementine. And that's gonna kind of pull away from it too much. But you can see a lot of the same elements, right? Like you can see the HP bar down here at the bottom. Something new was photon points were attached to the weapons directly. They weren't on the character. So you could, spam your PAs over and over and over again, and when you ran out, you would just switch weapons.
Swap? Okay, I see.
Mm-hmm. So a very common thing was either having multiples of a weapon, that way you could spam PAs consistently, because you really didn't normal attack that often.
Yeah.
You mostly just pressed the PA button, and you pressed it a lot. And you just drained as much PP as you possibly could. This is Mill doing a... I'm actually going to turn off the music because it's kind of hard to balance later. But this is Mill doing a speed run of this mission specifically. And as you can see, the walking speed, not really much you can do about that. But he's switching to a specific weapon that he can use a PA that lets him move large distances in a short period of time. Level cap is 180. He's fighting level 175 monsters. See him set on the floor. Underneath his HP bar on the bottom left-hand side, you can see that he's got something built up. That's something specific to cast. It's called an SUV weapon. Think Photon Blast, but race specific.
Okay.
So his is going to summon like a weapon that's going to attack a bunch of enemies on the field. Now again, speed run, so he's saving his for a specific point. He's going to use it. But here it goes. He summons a giant sword and he's just going to smack the ground. Does a bunch of damage, goes away. The concepts are kind of similar that you've seen beforehand. Things like, photon blast and all that good stuff, right? But
yeah,
when you really look at it, it's just another instanced action game. There's no jump, no dodge, no block. Those things didn't exist at the time. The fact that he blocks anything is complete RNG.
Yeah.
You can see he's not really attempting to get around specific attacks. He's just trying to kill the thing before it even does enough damage to hurt him.
Is there a block skill that nope. I don't know.
Nope,
okay, so
RNG.
it's no level up block. It's just a base block and has RNG to it.
Yeah, so it's fully based on stats. So certain classes just had more of a chance to quite literally to dodge certain abilities, to block certain abilities. There was reduced damage and things like that would happen. Certain attacks you could shrug off while others would just straight knock you down. Like you see there, he just blocked. So there's a lot of attacks that he took and he hit. Like right here, he blocks. Like it's just RNG chance, did 0 damage and he blocked it. But that's common that happens for this class. It doesn't happen for a lot of other classes.
I see.
You can also see this is something that didn't exist all the time back in Phantasy Star Universe that was added in. But I'm sure if you've heard the concept of a just attack. I kind of skipped over this in Blue Burst because they really didn't use it very much. But the way that combos worked back in Phantasy Star Online 1 and 2 and Blue Burst is that you didn't just combo if you pressed the attack button. You actually had to time.
Oh, and yes.
Back in Blue Burst and 1 and all that stuff, if you weren't rhythmically pressing your attacks, you just didn't do anything. There was no thing on screen that would show you when to do
sword, it. So I got to experience that a lot, and it made me have to figure out the timing.
Right.
Very early on, yeah.
And it's something that happened a lot of. And at the conception of PSU at the very start, it did not have the same concept. You could just attack, and there was no increased damage. Now, down the line in later expansions, they came up with an expansion called Ambitions of the Illuminous that changed a lot of things. That was kind of their big expansion that they had. There was only one. But the certain classes got added in. There was the concept of a whole new race that was added in because, funny enough, people looked at Doomans as a race that got added into Phantasy Star Online 2. Or in the portable games, they actually were added in PSU. There was a character that was the first Dooman in PSU. And we'll talk about that in just a moment because it was actually based off of an illness, funny enough. But the concept of this just attack system where it's timed, you can actually see if you're watching him attack is he's timing his attack and there's a little yellow ring that pops up. That's him timing the just attack just right. The extra damage they added in, that was later, and that happened in PSU and got added in. So the concept of it being removed was something that added into NGS, but this existed back in back in PSO1 essentially.
Yeah,
it's just evolved and changed how it went.
When was this game made? Because I played a couple of other RPGs that had similar concepts to their attack combos too.
So this one was 2012. This is when we were playing PSU. I'm not sure if that was. Yeah, that should be. Yeah, that's online too. Yeah,
that's later than I thought it would be. I thought it was going to be 2008 or 9 or 10.
Yeah. So funny enough, this is a form of Dark Falcus. What you'll find is Falls in the Universe series kind of merged with some things. It's a little weird. Is this labeled wrong? Is this what? Hang on. When was Online 2? Hold on. Let me double check something here really quick because I want to make sure if that is labeled wrong, it is actually labeled wrong. Was that Ambitions of the Illuminous release date?
wrong.
Phantasy Star Universe release date.
06? 06 makes more sense.
Yeah, that's 06. Hold on. Let me check and see when Ambitions of the Illuminous came out.
Okay. Yeah, because that was like 2012 with like the play style and graphic quality.
That's funny. Yeah, no, it's definitely way off. Okay, I'm gonna leave this up so we have like kind of a better understanding of these two. Because like it's just been so long, everything kind of meshes together. A big portion or a big problem too is was that I'm trying to think release date of the game versus when it came out in JP. Because again, like many of these games, they came out in Japan first and we didn't get them for much later.
Yeah.
Ambitions of the Illuminous came out in 2008. I'm sorry, 2007. But okay. I'm not sure when we got it specifically. Let me see real quick. Is this? Oh, that's definitely a different video. That's actually online. Okay, that's PSO2. That's why it's mislabeled. So with Universe itself, like you kind of see how things evolve, like how things played. I'm gonna go back to this video just so it's here. You can skip ahead a little bit. Not a big deal. Know that this wasn't a thing. This wasn't a thing. These aren't like this little dot wasn't a thing here. That these are all the things that have been added in because people are playing on the Clementine server. So they allow specific mods to be able to kind of mix into the game for quality of life purposes. But you can see like the whole concept of fighting in an instance like dungeon and all that sort of stuff. Like that's something that happened a lot. That's pretty standard. There was no open world. It was lobbies and dungeons. That's how the game realistically worked for everything.
From what I understand, NGS is the first open world one, correct?
Yes, it's the first open world online one. I guess you could argue that the original Phantasy Star game was open world, but like Phantasy Star 1, 2, and 3, 4.
Okay.
Because I
mean, technically, all of those are open world. I don't know why. I just don't, because of the style of game, I don't consider that when I, think of the category of open world games, which I guess I shouldn't, but you know what I mean when I say that.
Oh yeah, no, it's mostly for the sake of argument because I mean, I know people out there like, oh, well, you're forgetting old games, and that's fair. Technically, those games
most of them are open world then.
But at the time, this was like, NGS is the first like open world online game that they had, right? So PSU, the things that it did that was like unique at the time, I mentioned that demons actually were a concept that existed back in PSU. There's a character who went through this issue with the seed virus. So you know how we have Dark Falls, we had Falls spawn back in PSO2. The equivalent of that, Dark Falls, of course, existed in this world. There are other entities that existed as well, mixed in. Back in Phantasy Star Online 1, you had other things like Olga Flow mixed in and things like that. But that not all of those big bads showed up in later games, right? They kind of didn't all come through. It's pretty much mostly Dark Falls. Dark Falls mixes with a couple of different enemies in the PSU universe. You see things like Dark Focus and so on and so forth. So, but the concept of Falls showing up again after 1,000 years, all those things like that still existed. And I'm sure you remember if anyone's ever told you kind of how Phantasy Star Online 2's like casts work or whatever, like how people became casts and stuff like that. And dealing with like things like photon viruses and things like that. Like, basically, the original Dooman was Huga, I believe his name was a human named Huga who succumbed to the seed virus. And he was the first Dooman that existed in the Phantasy Star like series itself. Which like he eventually recovered from the seed virus, and then it didn't really mean a whole lot to us at the time because the concept of Dooman really wasn't fleshed out. It was just we knew he was different. At least, well, okay, so that's not completely true. There was another. Okay, someone did mention it. So what Half is saying is technically correct, but like mainstream Dooman that like most people know about, essentially, I guess is the right way to put that. I personally don't know enough about this individual to give you like a proper timeline for it, but it is worth mentioning that technically, that they were the first Dooman, so to speak. But that was like the first mainstream, like, okay, we know of a character, they're being established, so on and so forth.
I see.
And you can see, You can see the combat's most of the same stuff. The one thing that was more unique to Phantasy Star Universe was the concept of a one-handed weapon. Right now, this person's using a sword, and then they have a range mag in their offhand, I believe is what they have. Oh no, they have a tech mag in their offhand, meaning they could press a button, switch to the tech mag, and then cast a spell. But they also have, like,
does the mag like bite?
So there's two different types of mags that existed. You have range mags and tech mags. The range mag would just automatically shoot on its own if you were just near an enemy, like a target. The tech mag would allow you to equip spells to it that you could cast, like a left-handed wand, basically.
What? That's so cool.
So the concept of yes, the concept of their mags also were very different. They had what's called a partner machine. Some of my PSU friends out there might be able to correct me on this. I'm pretty sure that was the name that they used for it. But the concept of what we have that are mags right now existed as partner machines back in the PSU space, where they essentially were kind of like your companions that you built up
like
over time. Like
companion personal assistant type of thing.
Exactly. They would stay back in your room. They were your storage. They also were your crafting bench in a sense. Yeah. So the funny thing we used to do, because the way you would craft weapons is you would get what's called a board, which is a recipe for them. And then you would take that and you'd give it to your PM or your partner machine. They would then craft it, and there was an RNG chance of them either passing or failing the craft based on how difficult the craft was and their level. And there was also an RNG chance if it was a melee weapon for them to apply an element to it, and how high that element actually would be. Between, I think, what was it, like as low as a 0% for a neutral, or as high as 50% for any specific element.
Did it tell you beforehand?
No, like, it was fully the chance? RNG.
Oh.
No. Well, the chance of you passing the craft, yes. The chance of what it would end up being, the chance of how high it would be, no chance.
Oh, damn.
You just you craft it and you hope for the best.
The thrill.
Most boards were most boards were, I believe, 3 crafts you had on them, and then you would lose the recipes. So you didn't even keep recipes. And the best weapons, most of the best weapons in the game, you had to craft them. So while it was fun to an extent, it was vastly unbalanced.
I mean,
because
you
melee completely got screwed.
Most RPGs kind of had like meh. Like there would be like really good things about crafting, but like the whole like base system of crafting was still off then.
Oh, it was completely. It was built in a way originally, at least at the start, there were a lot of systems that existed in Phantasy Star Universe that were built in a way to quite literally keep you doing things. And it was very obvious.
I think that's what it is.
They wanted you to keep crafting and trying to make something better. And it was RNG and it sucked, but like you dealt with it. Like that was part of the game, because that was the part of a lot of games at the time. I mean, God, look at what we played back in the day. This was around the time that RuneScape was like really popping off and what it was doing at the time. This time people were playing old games like, I'm trying to think of like Life, freaking, what other old Maple Story? I mean, you guys name it. I'm sure there's a game you guys can think of back then.
Yeah.
Final Fantasy 11. Like it goes on and on. RNG, getting screwed over by your crafts, getting screwed over by something in the game, like it existed in every game. It was everywhere.
I mean, everything I was thinking of was not even online, but like it had the crafting system where you just got screwed over in some way. Like it almost felt like you had to get screwed over in crafting systems like that. You either get really lucky or completely screwed over, or partially screwed over.
Yeah, and the biggest issue is that it was only vastly unfair and unbalanced for melee. Range never experienced this, and tech never experienced this, because range, you would equip bullets that would be your elements. So your weapons could switch elements based on the bullet you equip to it. And techs, you had techs. You just equipped the proper tech, and that was it. So, unfortunately, melee.
I didn't realize that's what you meant when you said off balance. Oh,
yeah.
God.
So it was, if you made a rifle, as long as it succeeded, the rifle was useful. But if I made, let's say, a spear, if that spear succeeded and it succeeded with 0% element, it might as well have failed as far as I'm concerned. This is just being sold. That way I can get my money back to try to craft another one. Elements were a very big thing, and you didn't really want to miss out on them if you could help it.
Oh, was there like a personal shop, or was it just like...
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Personal shop was a very big thing.
Oh, hell yeah.
And that actually brings me to the upgrade system. So the upgrade system that existed in PSU, as you can see, I played a lot of PSU and PSO2, so that's going to be the longest of these segments.
I know we've been on PSU for a while.
Yeah, so the upgrade system that existed back in to be fair, a lot of these systems didn't exist back in the older games. Like there was RNG to an extent. Like some people still play Phantasy Star Blue Burst because they don't have to deal with a lot of these systems. You just get a thing and you have the thing. That was mostly the end of it. That was not the end of it in PSU. You got a thing and now you have to make it the strongest possible. And when it fails, you might cry. And that's what's going to bring us into the upgrade system of this process. Now, a lot of that stuff changes in a portable version. We'll get to that. But the upgrade system existed in what they called grinds. You would grind a weapon and the weapon started out at 0. And as you grind the weapon up, the higher grinds have less of a chance of succeeding. Well, this was a game that at the time when Phantasy Star Universe originally came out, which I know I'm about to make a lot of Universe players cry. If you failed the grind, it broke the weapon. It was gone.
Oh my God. What?
You would destroy the weapon. And it had an animation for the little bar that was going up that would start shaking and then it would explode and bye-bye, your weapon's gone. Now.
Not even it just being like not upgradable anymore or any like just gone? That's mean.
You could have weapons in the game. Now, I want to say this was the case, and again, you guys can correct me if I'm mistaken. It was a very short term between the two time frames, and it might have been that I just didn't play at the time, but there was an event in Phantasy Star Universe called Max Attack G, and Max Attack G counted the number of enemies that you would kill. And the top 500 players that killed enough enemies, at least this happened on Global at the time, got a specialized shotgun. It was only 500 on the server.
Oh
ever.
No.
You could sell it to other players, but no more would exist. This weapon existed when that upgrade system existed.
That's mean.
There are players giving reports of upgrading that weapon at low ranks because they thought, okay, it's got a really good chance of succeeding. It shouldn't be a problem, and having them explode. And there's no way to get that weapon again. So, and there are weapons that exist in these games that don't have a way of getting a hold of them again. That isn't even counting the 15 stars that exist in the Phantasy Star Universe, where the only way to get certain 15 stars was you only got one of them on your entire account.
What? So you could only ever get like one?
Get one, yes. The 15 stars that we got, at least by the time I stopped playing, there were only 3 15 stars. There was a sword, there was a rifle, and there was a rod. And you only got one of them. It's a choice. And this upgrade system didn't exist when that came out. However, there was a shift to that upgrade system that almost felt even worse. Well, it didn't feel worse. It felt better, but like it was kind of a stain on your weapon in a sense. So
why is exactly what I'm asking to right now? Why? That's just mean. Why are they so mean? What do you do to them?
Eventually they changed the upgrade system into what it's like a 0 out of 10 system. What would happen is if your weapon broke, it would go back down to 0, but it would be 0 out of 9, meaning your max upgrade can only go to 9. And then it would broke again, it would happen again. So you have weapons that would get to 5 of 5. Or if you're like the most unlucky man in the world, you would have a weapon that was 1 of 1. Because the first upgrade was a guarantee. So like that existed for the upgrade system and that was totally fine. But keep in mind, that's on top of the RNG of melee weapons having different elements. That's on top of the RNG of having to even make the weapon in the first place.
Oh my God, that's way too much. On top of the RNG
of needing to get the drops you needed for making the weapon in the first place. And all of that sounds insane, right? But on top of all of those things, you couldn't do everything on one character. You would level up a partner machine at the time and you would be able to level them up to like max of making, let's say, melee weapons. But they would suck at making all the other types of weapons. So then you needed to make another character and level up a different partner machine, right? So like sometimes you would like have your friends help you out if they had a different partner machine. And the joke sometimes is like, oh, he made it and he failed it, or he made it and it was crap. It's like, okay, cool, give your partner machine this. And they'd open up the present, it'd be a partner machine reset. It's like, oh, go die for screwing up my weapon. So it was very inclusive. It was really fun. We had a good time with it. But like that was the system that you dealt with at the time. That was PSU. All those things existed. And it wasn't difficult. it wasn't difficult to understand, but man, it was punishing sometimes.
That's a lot.
But at the same time, those moments where you got the 10 out of 10 of your weapon, right? Like, my first really big moments of winning a lot of money when it came to the game was like, if anyone who remembers Phantasy Star Universe, the 𝓤𝓬𝓬𝓬𝓬 cannon, which was a very specific laser cannon that dropped off a very specific enemy, and this was the upgraded version of that laser cannon. I had one of the first ones ever upgraded to 10 of 10 on the server on the Xbox 360 servers. That was super cool to get. And the same week, I did the same thing for a pair of Gilded Millas. So I made billions in a week.
I like the names.
So yeah, it was insane how much money I made at that time. But like those were great feelings. But this is also the same game where leveling your PAs consisted of spamming the PA over and over again. Over and over and over again, getting percentages up over time. And PAs went up as high as level 50 in some cases. Leveling your Resta, your Reverser, your different buffs. There were parties that existed called buff parties where you stood around at a crystal and you just spam the same spell for hours to level it. This was part of being a support, because if your buffs sucked, no one wanted you to use yours. They were going to use their own. Or they didn't want you to play that class in the first place.
Oh no, poor support. But support have to struggle. Support's already supporting. Come on. Right. I always believe in being nice to the support classes.
Right, but that was part of what you did. Like, you leveled your stuff. Like, White Beast parties standing around at the crystal spamming for hours while watching something on another monitor existed. That was a thing. And that's how you leveled. And the whole reason I'm saying these things now is because if you think about what it is now, imagine you had to stand around to spam shift the D band on a Tector for it to be useful. God help us all. No one would want to do that. The other cool thing I guess people really liked were the partner machines. Like our partner machines could go on quests with us. We leveled them. Like, they leveled up with you. They would get stronger, and you could have them as like someone that would slot into your party. And at the time, a really cool system was like, if someone else tried to join your party in the middle of a mission and your partner machine was taking up a slot, the game would automatically kick the partner machine out and put the person in the slot for you.
Oh,
like, you could always have that slot filled up, and that was really cool. Something that actually worked out very, very well. Parties that's also, I think, 6-man parties. Yeah, so it was definitely a cool vibe. There were a lot of interesting lobbies, different types of missions, so on and so forth. Again, we could go on and on about Phantasy Star Universe for a long time, but the craze of portable gaming happened. And with portable gaming came Phantasy Star Portable.
I love, oh my God. So, okay, before we get into this, can you tell me, was it weird? Did they make weird stuff with portable games?
So, kinda, it was still Phantasy Star Universe, but it was like Phantasy Star Universe plus Max Deluxe.
I see. I love, I love, I'm a portable gamer. Like, that's my favorite thing. And I loved seeing either variants of games or continuations of games in the portable version, because it would either be something just completely buck wild, just that doesn't even need to exist, or it would be a better version of the original, but also a condensed better version because it was a portable game.
So I know a lot of people talk about Phantasy Star Online 2 for having some of the best crossovers in the Phantasy Star series. Those people have never played Phantasy Star Portable. And that is, I believe that to be 100% a fact, because you cannot beat playing Phantasy Star as Hatsune Miku using leaks as a weapon. You can't.
I'm so dead. What did you just say to me?
You can't beat the Colonel showing up, smacking things with a fried chicken as an axe.
The Colonel.
There are just certain things that existed as far as crossovers are concerned that just were never as close to whatever any sort of crossover you could ever think of. It just,
oh my God, that is great. That is so great.
Pizza Hut cutter, leak attacks, bonk sticks, toy hammers. It was off the wall. Whatever they could get themselves to use, they did when it came to Phantasy Star Portable. And this was Portable 1, and then there was also Portable 2 Infinity. These were basically what felt like how can I explain it? It's not like a direct sequel. It was obviously after of Universe's story, because Universe itself was its own standalone game, and it also had online mode. and then had a story that kind of continued in the online mode. It's okay. So I don't want to call this a sequel in a sense because the storyline kind of ended at Universe, and Portable and Portable to Infinity are both their own story. So like from a story perspective, they're different. However, from a universe, like the actual universe itself and some of the characters, like they're the same, you know what I'm saying? Like they're still connected in a sense. In the same way that PSO2 and NGS are supposed to be somewhat connected, but the stories are very different. That's like how this is sort of connected as well.
So it's like Final Fantasy and the 13s. Well, I mean, the 13s are way more connected than that, actually. I think about that.
Yeah, it's a little different. Like, so like, for example, I know one people tend to always bring up is like the main character of Phantasy Star Universe was Ethan Weber, and his sister Lumia was like a child back in the Universe series. But then in Portable 2, she exists as a full-grown adult, or not a full-grown adult, but like she's older basically, and is a part of like, you know, the Guardians that are patrolling, you know, the universe and the space and everything like that. So like, you know, characters are still together, but it's not the same storyline. Like things are very different. Things have changed, so on and so forth. So
okay. I see.
There was an actual closing out of the story in universe as opposed to like it continuing.
So it's like story clusters. Different eras. Yeah. Okay. That makes more sense.
Yeah, a different era is a good way of putting it. Exactly. So I'm going to go ahead and play this. As you can see, something already immediately comes up is that it's just missions. And as you can see, 1, 2, 3, 4, Max Tech 1, 2, like multiple versions of the same mission. Very common. But levels of enemies also very common, very high. But from you can tell is that the UI itself is extraordinarily large.
Oh my god!
because this is on a mobile platform. This is on the PSP. So
yeah,
you really didn't have access to
PSP UI.
Yeah, so this is PSP. This is Phantasy Star Portable 2 Infinity, by the way. The only reason I went to Portable 2 Infinity immediately is because there's not a lot of difference between Portable 1 and Portable 2 Infinity. Portable 2 Infinity is just mostly Portable 1 with extra stuff, extra systems added in, so on and so forth. This is where they brought in the system of being able to swap armor on the fly, as well as swapping your weapons on the fly. So you know how you have the palette to swap your weapons? They had a palette for armor as well. So if you look in the bottom right-hand corner, you can see he's using light armor, but a dark weapon. They also have brought in different gameplay mechanics. So for example, ranged weapons had chain building. And as you can see...
I was like, what is this chain? Is everyone
a gunner? Explosions. Right. It wasn't uniquely a gunner thing. So whenever they use their tech that's on square, it builds the chain. But whenever they use their tech that's on triangle, it bursts the chain. So you would have like specific techs that you would use on square to build up chain.
God.
And then you use your triangle tech to burst that chain.
Can they give back, please? I like that.
Well, the problem with a lot of these things is when you put all of these things together and you're very good at them, you break everything.
Oh, that makes
it horrifically bad. It's not balanced. You would absolutely obliterate everything in front of you. Does it show it? Yeah, so he's fighting level 210 enemies on his own right now in a party by himself for a mission that is actually technically set for, I think, 4 people with 2 NPCs. So it's pretty crazy, and it gets pretty up there. Now, the concept of switching your armor and things like that existed in PSU, except there wasn't a system built into it. So like, let's say, for example, you were using armor that had fire element to it. Someone hit you with ice, you're taking more damage.
Yeah.
So on and so forth. And you would get absolutely obliterated by these other things. So swapping your armor with something that had
full notification.
Yeah,
200 max.
Your max level. 200 is max, yep.
Oh god. Oh, turn it off. Go
so
away.
You would see EXP full a lot if you're a max level.
Oh no.
And either I never found it or it never existed, but I didn't see a way to get rid of it. So sorry.
Oh goodness.
As far as that goes, it continues. The concept though of photon blasts, or I guess in this case, Barry is a Newman, I believe. So he would be using not an infinity blast. The Newman equivalent of an SUV weapon, essentially. It's most like a photon blast, essentially. Like there's different wording for it. It's really difficult to like remember all of them off the top of my head, but like it was basically a photon blast in a sense. It built up, you used it, so on and so forth. The characters that had very unique ones were was it Mirage Blast? Oh, that's right, because the Doomins. This is the first time the Doomins were a playable class in the Phantasy Star series. And Doomins were probably the most fun to play, in my opinion, when it came right down to it, because they were all attack, no defense. They had the highest attack of everything. However,
okay, I see.
They had the lowest defense rating of anything. They were powerful,
full
but
on glass cannon. Got it.
Absolutely. And it happened. you would get bopped and you would get one shot. You had lower HP than everyone. You had lower defensive stats than everyone. If you got hit, you got absolutely bonked. The whole point of the Doomins in this game was mostly because they released a new class as well called Vanguard, which had a very specific different style of play that was specific to these games themselves. We could go into Vanguard, but it really doesn't make much of sense for Phantasy Star Games because I never used it again. It was just a one-time thing for this game itself. Forces, Hunters, Rangers, those existed. The concept of a gunner didn't really exist. It was Phi Gunner. The Phantasy Universe series and the Portable series brought about the concept of mixed classes, where you would take archetypes and kind of mush them together. So if you took a Hunter and a Ranger, you got Phi Gunner. If you took, say, a Force and a Gunner, you got a Gun Techer. Different little kind of mix-ups like that would happen, essentially. And there were a lot of different classes that could use certain weapons up to a certain degree. So, of course, you know the system of, A ranks, S ranks, B ranks, C ranks, all that stuff, right? When it comes to, like, the levels of, like, where you complete something, right? Well, that concept was actually on weapons. A 9-star weapon was an A rank weapon. 10-star weapon was an S rank weapon. S ranks are 10 stars and above.
Wait, does that mean you can't complete something at that rank without that weapon?
No, it was just the type of weapon, because certain classes can only use weapons up to a certain degree.
Oh, so they just saved people the trouble and just made their own tier list. Got it.
You could kind of say that. But I was also an Acrofighter back in the day, and they can only use up to A ranks of twin swords and twin daggers, though they attacked faster than any other class in the game.
Oh, so I would say not every weapon had like an A, an S rank, and like...
They all had them, but not every class could use them all at that applicable rank.
That's weird.
So certain classes could use certain weapons up to specific ranks. So like, let's say as an Acrofighter, I could use any two-handed weapon, like basically like dual swords, dual daggers. Those weapons I can only use up to an A rank. I can only use up to 9-star versions of those weapons. But one-handed weapons, I could use S rank versions of, so all the way up to like 15-star of those style of weapons. And certain classes could use other weapons, but it could only use up to specific variants. So depending on the combination of classes you used, you'd be able to use weapons of up to a specific type.
Okay, that makes more sense. I thought it was just like some classes were just fucked. They just can't use.
Yeah, it's just some classes
your
couldn't
specific weapons. Okay.
Yeah, so some classes couldn't use certain weapons. Now, later on down the line, they changed things up to make it so you could increase your ranks with specific weapons and specific classes, so you could use higher tiered weapons. But it was a very common thing that existed for most of PSU. It was, I believe, PSP Infinity, or Phantasy Star Portable Infinity. Like, I was like the one where that whole process changed. But again, going into the specifics of it would be much more complicated to understand. It's just easier to understand that, hey, look, this is what you were able to use at the time. And you were able to use up to S rank weapons or A rank weapons or B rank weapons or whatever it happened to be. Like, a really easy one would be like, Hunter was the first like striking class in the game. Like, it's the very beginning, right? Like, it was the base Hunter. Hunters couldn't use S rank weapons. Hunters used used B and C rank weapons. Now, the upgraded version of Hunter, Fortifighter, could use A and S rank weapons because it was the upgraded tier of that version of the class. All those types of classes existed.
Hold on. Wait. Upgraded version of class.
Yes. So
hold on.
When I said Phantasy Star Universe, Portable 2, and Portable 2 Infinity had probably some of the most classes in any of the Phantasy Star games, I was not kidding.
Oh, okay. Okay. So are those like, oh, yeah, that's what you were showing me in PSU, I think.
Let me see if I can bring up PSU.
Yeah. Obviously, I didn't understand correctly. So if you could explain better.
Right. Let me see if I can pull up the class chart, and chat might be able to find it for me faster than I could. So if you guys do find it, definitely link it to me, but let me see if I can find it.
Yeah, you have to link it to Krono because chat's going to need the link.
Yeah. Classes. Is this the offline version of this website? Yeah, because it's a lot. Like there's a lot of combinations, certain classes being able to use certain weapons, so on and so forth.
So a prestige of class, okay. So like, do you have to max out that class to get to that? Like, is it like that, like an actual?
Yeah, so you had to level up specific classes to be able to unlock other classes.
Okay, so it's legit just like prestiging a class.
Right, and well, in the sense, because you're not going back down afterwards, right? Like prestige usually like you de-level back to 1 or whatever.
Back. Okay, so you don't start back.
Yeah,
okay.
That wasn't the case there. Now you would be level 1 of that class once it's unlocked, but you would be of that specific class, not like your character's level. Classes.
Oh, okay. So class and character level are different. Okay.
Exactly. Class level and character level
so
separated.
Many things.
So hang on, is this okay? This, you know what? I think Clementine's thing is actually a good thing to show off here. So here, I'll pull this over really fast.
Okay.
You guys can kind of see, right? So you had different types. Now I'm going to show what's specific to Clementine, what's specific to base, and then what's specific to Ambitions of the Illuminous, which was like their first expansion that they had, right?
Okay.
So the base classes, you started with Hunter, Ranger, Force. Hunter, Ranger, Force. They were able to use up to C and B rank of weapons of their respective classes. Then you had the expert classes, what they called them. Now these classes existed during the regular version of the game, and those classes were Spy Gunner, Gun Techer, War Techer, Fortifighter, Fortigunner, Fortitecher, Pro Transer. Now that sounds kind of difficult to keep up with until you understand the class nomenclature. Spy Gunner, well, Fighter, Gunner, Hunter, Ranger. Hunter level 7, Ranger level 5. Mostly Fighter, also add in Gunner. So you could use up to level 40 of skills, which was like PAs basically, level 30 of bullets. It wasn't your specialty, but you could do up to level 30 of bullets. Let's say we take something like Gun Techer. Gun Techer, Force, Ranger. Mostly Gunner, also add in Tech. So 7-5, Ranger Force. Level 10 of skills, because you don't really use any melee weapons whatsoever. So your PA is going up to level 10, but level 40 bullets. And then you had also attack and support techs. Your attack techs will only go up to 30. Your support techs will go up to 40. Gun Techer was built in a way that you use your guns for offense and you use your techs for like support, essentially, is the way that it was kind of built, set up.
Yeah. Okay.
And it kind of just completes that nomenclature. So you have War Techer, Hunter, Force, Fortifighter. This is where you went into like the expert versions of certain classes. Fortifighter was the upgraded Hunter. Forte Gunner, upgraded Ranger. Forte Techer, upgraded Force.
Okay,
they're able to use simple. 40 of both. So yeah, once you understand the nomenclature, it's very simple to keep up with what's actually going on.
Okay.
And this is when things got kind of wild. So then you have your first like really fully mixed up, which was Pro Transer. Pro Transer was everything across the board.
Yeah, I was like, that's everything.
5-5-5. It had 40 of skills, 40 of bullets. Couldn't use attack techs or support techs at all. Its main ability was using traps, which were items, and it had specialized traps it was able to use that would mostly stun lock a ton of enemies and were so powerful that everyone would carry them for the Pro Transer. So if they ran out of traps, they would just drop them and the Pro Transer would pick them up and use them. So they were very strong, very, very powerful. Then Ambitions of the Illuminous came out and more mixing happened. So that brought in my favorite class in the entire game, Acrofighter. Acrofighter had advanced skill types with single-handed weapons and had fast reflexes with multi-weapons. So this was a mix of putting together Hunter and Ranger up to 7 per build. You can use 40 for skills, 30 for bullets, and one-handed weapons you can use high, but two-handed weapons or dual weapons, right? You use faster, but lower rarity, meaning you only went up to A ranks with them.
Oh, and then it brought about, I see.
And then it brought about probably the strongest support that's ever existed in any Phantasy Star game ever, in my opinion. The Acrofighter. The Acrofighter specialized in support techs. They could use attack techs, they could use bullets, they could use skills. Not very high of any of those.
Yeah.
But the support techs went to 50.
Oh, yeah. The support techs are really high.
Insane as far as that went. Support techs were not just buffing the player, they were buffing the player, and there was also debuffs for enemies.
Oh,
so
what?
When you buff the player and you debuff the enemy in every single aspect, it was absolutely ridiculous.
That is pretty broken.
Destroy things. This
I feel like that would be like a good class to like solo content with.
See, it was probably the worst solo class.
Really?
But everyone wanted it. If you were to duo anything, you probably wanted an Acrofighter.
Yeah, because it seems like you can use a little bit of everything, but then you have like, I don't know. But also I don't know like what exactly like all the support techs are, so.
Yeah, so like you had access to a lot of these things, right? Like certain classes had access to support techs up to a specific degree. You look at like, something like a Fortitaker that had access to support techs up to 40 and access up to 40 of attack techs, but it didn't have access up to, super high on these. And then it brought about the first master classes. The master classes were supposed to be the evolved expert classes, and they were pretty wild. So if you managed to get for Fight Master is Fortifighter, I believe Phi Gunner, a 10, you unlocked Phi Master, which allowed you to specialize in close quarters combat fighting. You had specific weapons. You could only use them at S ranks. Skills went up to 50. Gun Master, same thing. Porta Gunner, Gun Techer, 50. Master Force, this is where it got a little interesting. So War Techer and Fortitecher, you had 10 on support techs, but 50 attack techniques.
And
these spells were insane. When I mean they lagged your screen, it was absolutely ridiculous.
Wait. So Acrofighter existed before the master classes.
Right. So there were these, and then it went into these classes here.
Did it mess anything up though, with it being like the only class to have support text to 50, or is it not really because it's support text?
So it didn't really mess anything up. It was the only class that ever had support text up to 50, and that was kind of like its whole shtick was it was support.
I see.
But like realistically speaking, like you still could take a Fortitecher and be okay for the most part if you couldn't get an Acrofighter. But if you were a Fortitecher in a party with an Acrofighter, you just never touched your support text because like why bother? They're just gonna get overridden by the Acrofighter.
Yeah.
Realistically speaking. But if like let's say for example you wanted to solo something and you liked using techs, you would then buff yourself because your support techs are pretty solid on your own.
Oh yeah, your support techs are 40.
Exactly. And the funny thing about the Acrofighter was that we'll go into like the different weapons or whatever in a second, but like they had certain weapons that they could use better than other classes. So it's just kind of how their setup was. This is like when you first really started to see the use of the offhand mag for an Acrofighter. It was like stuff for like Acrofighters. Like they didn't really use a wand plus offhand mag or use a rod. They normally used a main hand whip and like an offhand mag essentially.
Ooh.
That they would use for like fighting stuff, but while also being able to support like with heals and with dispels and with debuffs and so on and so forth.
So that's why people keep asking for a whip in PSO. Okay,
a lot of weapons
they were
that
just
exist
being like, never mind. I thought they were just being sus. So sorry, chat.
A lot of weapons that exist in PSO2 are weapons that are either combined or that branch off of what they were in PSU. Like Wired Lance. Wired Lance is just claws plus whip.
Oh.
That is all Wired Lance is. It looks like a unique weapon, sure, but no, it's claws and whip put together. That's all that is. That's why when someone asks me, do I ever see... Like people are like, oh, do you think whip would ever come back? No, because it's already in the game. It's part of it's already existed. I'm sorry, it's there.
I see.
those are the classes themselves. And you can see, like, these master classes, you can only use S ranks. Can't use any A ranks, can't use any B ranks or C ranks. You were locked to S rank stuff only. And then master or acro master, you can pretty much ignore. That was specific to Clementine. They made up their own class, and I love it. It's my favorite. The only time that you could use dual swords with an S rank. But you can kind of see if you go over, I believe, does it show it? Yeah, so B rank and C rank weapons, it tells you what each class can actually use. So if we went to something like, let's say, Acrofighter could use S ranks of one-handed swords, daggers, whips, handguns, cards. So you remember how you had Talus that existed? And the specific camos that like look like cards and stuff like that? It's because cards were actually a weapon back in PSU. They were essentially like a fan that you would kind of like swing, and little cards would kind of fly out and hit the enemy from ranged.
Oh, that's so cool.
Wands, and then TCMs, which were tech mags, I believe. That's what that's supposed to be. Yeah, it was the tech mag that you'd be able to equip. And then you had A rank that you could use for specific weapons. And you can see it's twin daggers, twin handguns, machine guns, and RCMs, which were range mags.
Okay.
So classes could use different tiers of weapons based on their class combinations. Something like, for me, where I loved Acrofighter back in the game itself, I could only use A ranks of twin sabers, which were twin swords, A ranks of twin daggers. But because I could attack faster with them, I could get the strongest version of that weapon as powerful as possible and still be adequate, if not sometimes more damage than other classes.
Because of your speed. I see.
Exactly.
So wait, were daggers just one dagger?
Dagger was one dagger. Twin daggers were two.
Okay. I just assumed that daggers was like a double weapon.
Right. And then also, I mean, you have to keep in mind that humans also were better at being Acrofighters. They had a 5% damage or stat buff, and then you had 20% faster animation speeds.
Yeah.
And all of these things, I know I mentioned it after, of course, they going into PSP2i, but all of these things kind of still fit into Phantasy Star Portable and Portable to Infinity. Portable and Portable to Infinity are basically just take PSU and then add in a bunch more stuff, and then put it on mobile platform. So it was just what existed for that time. And then
this is occasionally why portable games are superior. I know no one will agree with me, but that will be my hot take. Thank you. I will go now.
I will say that as someone who loved Phantasy Star Universe, if you told me that they were going to take Phantasy Star Portable to Infinity and they were going to put it on a console or on PC, they were going to make it so everyone had access to it, and that was the version of the game that they were going to bring back, that would be the best version.
Yeah.
Hands down. It had the most missions. It had the most combinations of classes. It had some of the most interesting combinations of attacks, things like that. Like, we could go into so much more, because I haven't touched nano blasts. I haven't touched not mirage blasts, were the infinity blasts, which were specific abilities. We haven't touched the different bosses that existed back then. The difference in the story, like it goes into in depth. But the thing is what we're trying to explain in a lot of this too, because I know it's kind of gotten away from like the original, is like, think of everything I just said. Now go back and think of Phantasy Star 1 and Phantasy Star 2.
Yeah, very different. And then, very, very
think
different.
of Phantasy Star Online 1, and think of Phantasy Star Online 2, and think of Phantasy Star Blue Burst. Like, generationally, things change so dramatically.
Yeah, that is a very drastic change. Oh my God, I almost forgot we even talked about those games.
Right, and that's the thing that happens for a lot of players, is that they get lost in their generation.
Yeah.
And their generation is what they remember of the game. And now we're going to take Phantasy Star Portable 2. We're going to take Phantasy Star Universe. We're going to take all of that, and we're now going to go into... Oh, did I lose it? I think I did. You know what? Let's pop over.
We're going to go back to 1987.
We're going to go back to... Oh, you know, I didn't include? There was a DS game.
Oh no, I don't know how I feel about that. It's either really good or really bad. DS games were kind of...
Phantasy Star Zero. Now, Phantasy Star Zero felt the most like Phantasy Star 1 and Phantasy Star 2, where the class restriction existed again, the weapons restriction kind of existed again, and where you had more of the the action-based combat that was more akin to Universe. The system of like, I mean, look at the UI. You can kind of see it here. Like if you look at the bottom left-hand corner, that's your second screen of the DS, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can see in the like you can see over here like your attacks, very reminiscent of PSO1. You can see like its HP. I mean, it says PP here because it's photon points now, but like you can see kind of like the way that it looked. It was very similar. It was kind of to try to bring people back to what Phantasy Star Online 1 was. And what Blue Burst was.
Even like the way that like the appearance of like the character and the platform you're on kind of makes me think of like the more like fantasy ones you showed me.
Exactly. So we're going to take that and then we're going to show you guys. Oh, does it show Phantasy Star Online 2? You know, I want to get, hold on. I'm going to get a very specific thing. So let me let that sit there for a moment. I want to grab something else because I want to grab, if I'm going to take Phantasy Star Online or PSO2 beta. So if I'm going to get you guys to take a look at Phantasy Star Online 2, I want to show you guys Phantasy Star Online 2, but like when it first came out. I'm talking like the original. So let me see if I can find the beta software, not beta software, but the beta gameplay, because that will take you back real far. And then we'll look at like where it started, and then we'll look at like where it ended by looking at like, I don't know, one of my fights maybe.
Yeah. But yeah, what you were saying about Zero, if it's a DS game, I like, as much as the DS kind of like promoted online play, they weren't very good at it at the beginning.
Okay, here we go. This is a really good example.
Yes, sure.
This is a pretty good example of what Phantasy Star Online 2 started as. So for those of you guys who remember this isn't even the original lobby, dude. No, this isn't the original lobby either. Let me see if we can find. Okay, I wanted to find it and then show it to you guys, but no, that's CBT. The problem with looking for beta software or beta version of this game is that we ran a global beta, meaning that people are going to say, "Oh, this is the beta for the game," but this is not.
Yeah,
it was not. It was basically episode 3. But I'll have to get you pictures and screenshots of what the lobby looked like back then, so you can kind of see the lobby here in a sense. And then you've seen PSO2's lobby, like. It doesn't look like this, but like it looks very similar. And if you want
so what is this, the beta of it?
This is supposed to be beta, but like this, I guess, is probably like the open beta.
Yeah.
The original closed beta actually even had a different lobby.
I kind of like how vibrant the lobby looks in this compared to like the current lobby. But like that has to do more so with like the color overhaul, I think, of NGS, right?
Yeah.
Or something. Yeah. It's too much of a gamble to see if it's appealing to like the audience or not. And not saying they have to go hard in the other direction and do everything that they think the grand majority wants, because those games never really last either, especially in the MMO area. But like, I don't know. That's just, I don't know. Even like, I don't know. It's just like, it's like assuming everyone likes feet, you know?
I mean,
but like making the feet really nice.
I mean, sure. I guess
but
that's
then
one way of looking at it.
Hey, I don't like feet. Like, and like, let's say like 60% of people like, I don't like feet either. It doesn't matter if the feet are nice.
Yeah.
I mean, how else to explain that?
You can, maybe they won't like you for not liking base game or whatever, but this is, as someone who loved playing base PSO2, guys, 90% of it was garbage.
I mean, I'm not saying I don't like the game. I think the combat looks amazing. Like even just like watching whenever you like fight, you know?
Yeah, but like so much of it was really bad, which is why, like, I know people have asked, like, how can you have faith that the game is going to be so good? Like, how do you still stick around and play the game itself if there are aspects you don't like about it? Because I've literally watched it grow from being absolute crap. Like, I've watched it start as absolutely nothing over and over again. it starts out figuring out what it is, like most games do. Like Final Fantasy has, 14 did this. World of Warcraft still figuring themselves out. Like games evolve.
After all this World of Warcraft MMO that's been around longer than all of those that you named, it's still figuring their shit out.
It's still figuring their shit out. Like there's so many things that evolve over time. Like everything started awful. They all, like, very few games started great when it comes to MMOs. And I promise, I wish I could tell you that MMOs start out fantastic, but they don't. They start out fun at first because we have nothing else. And by the time we get to the end of what we have to do, we're bored as hell. That's realistically the thing that happens when it comes to these games. That happens all the time. It happened with, well, what was it? Blue Protocol very quickly. It will happen again on global, as it will. Any other game that comes out, this is going to happen. It's the nature of the beast when it comes to MMOs these days. They figure themselves out, and it gets to a point like there's that golden moment where it's like, oh my God, this is awesome. Like they finally figured it out. They finally got it. And some games figure it out sooner than others.
Yeah. But see, okay, so I see like, so yes, NGS started off pretty bad. However, I will argue that NGS has a lot of things that seem very appealing, like from the start. It's more so well, obviously the launch of the game, but we don't talk about the launch of the game. We pretend like that day never happened. But like they also like recover pretty quickly though. Like I feel like the fan base doesn't allow them to recover. But like when they realize we don't like something or something is not working, they're willing to change things around more than like any other MMO that I've played. Like most MMOs, like even if they change like little things, they're like, I guess we'll like lean here, but like this is still what the game is. And we're like, we don't like that. But they're like, okay, well, we might change this, but this is still what it is. Like NGS is like, all right, fine, we'll try this. And like sometimes it's bad. Sometimes it's absolutely horrible, but they try to recover.
Whoever grabbed what they did ruined base PSO2. I'm gonna be real with you guys. It looked like crap at the start. I'm sorry. Maybe you guys hate me for this thing. A lot of base PSO2 looked like absolute garbage. If you disagree with me, go back to the original footage, guys. Put on anything that has open toes and look at your feet. It looks like
back to feet again. Sim. It's not just me, chat. See? Look.
It looks like crap sims. They are awful to look at.
Crap sim?
Most of what we looked at, we were looking at from further away. If you zoomed into anything, it looked awful. Compared to a lot of other games, it looked really bad. It looked dated. So like, I'm sorry, like maybe some people dislike that take or whatever, but like it was not good. It wasn't.
I will say base game does look more dated than it actually is.
Yeah, and like the graphics update, did it do some weird stuff? Yeah, it made some things look weird, but it didn't look good at the start either. Like, I'm not about to tell you that it was a beautiful thing to look at. It was a unique look, and that was about it. And that's what a lot of people like they didn't play at the time would tell you. And that's what sucks about this process is like, oh, it looked so much better before. No, it didn't. Like it didn't look that good, dude. It really didn't. It looked really bad. There's a reason why, and people don't talk about it all the time, but a lot of people used third-party renders.
You were getting bounced around like a basketball.
Yeah, I was getting destroyed.
He is dribbling you across the field.
I was getting wrecked, dude. I was getting destroyed. Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, okay, so I'm realizing the issue now. I'm realizing the issue and why people have this take that, NGS isn't like, it's not a core game. It's literally the same issue with anything. And I'm just saying this. I'm going to give the disclaimer that I'm also a Sonic fan, so I deal with this in a different way as well. It's the nostalgia versus quality. There's a lot of things that like in games and in series and in anime and anything that I am very nostalgic about, but that does not reflect the actual quality of what we got then. Moonies might hit me, but Sailor Moon is my favorite anime of all time. That is purely based on nostalgia.
Yeah, because I've seen Sailor Moon and I don't hate it. But there are some moments I was like,
Shut your mouth, Krono. You can't talk. You are not a Moonie. You are not allowed to say words. Get out.
There are just some moments.
I'll end the
There
call.
are just some moments. Hey, don't end me. All right. Fine.
You're not allowed to be in this conversation. No, but like a lot of people are so focused on this thing that they like, this character that they like, this aspect that they like, this thing that they spent thousands of hours grinding. And although they loved it, like you have to realize sometimes that that's not the best thing. There's a lot of games where I spent hundreds and hundreds of hours playing. And if I think about how the systems of the game actually worked, it was absolute shit. But I love that game.
If I ever have to level PAs again, I will personally slap everyone in the face that complained about not being able to level them. Because I'm going to explain to you guys what leveling PAs was. In PSU, it was spamming the same PA over and over again, not for hours, not for minutes, for days, 4 weeks to get to max level. It wasn't interesting. It wasn't fun. It wasn't new. It was tedious. It was repetitive, and it was dumb. You know what it was in PSO2? It was finding the PA on the ground. It was RNG until they introduced X cubes that you could trade in for the max level PA, and you never leveled PAs again. So the 2 iterations of leveling PAs has both sucked. So if I have to go back to leveling PAs, I'm beating people up. That's all I'm gonna say right now. Because it's never been good. That's nostalgia speaking.
This was interesting. You remember that whole 2 hours thing, and you're like, it's gonna be way less than 2 hours.
It's probably more than 2 hours. It's PSO2, PSU, and everything else takes forever. There's too much. 1v1 only, Final Destination Fox. Yes.
Oh no.
Also, I lost, by the way. At the end of it all, I spent 20 minutes fighting him, and I lost.
After? Why did you post that? I would delete it and pretend like it never happened.
He Zantetsuken me. Which is an Odin thing that one-shots you.
Damn.
And they walked off screen.
Oh my god. But yeah, it's just like a lot of times nostalgia is mistaken for like actual quality. And like I know like when it comes to gaming specifically, quality is kind of subjective. But like when it comes to the core of like what people want to play, what people find appealing, what lasts the longest, things like that, like a lot of the games we used to play, like let's be real, they kind of suck. that makes for like the better games that we have now. And sometimes you have to like deal with like the growing pains of this being different and this system being different because it didn't work, or you can't expand on that. So yeah, man, damn. Oh my god, this was way more interesting than I thought it would be. I thought you were gonna be like, here's what Phantasy Star games are like, what do you think? And I'm like, cool. And then that's it.
I guess there's like a final outro. We can just watch this. I think it's like 8 minutes. This just goes through every single Phantasy Star game. And you can kind of see as they go along how they change. But yeah, no, it's a lot of it's rose tinted glasses. It really is. And it's hard to like tell people that their game wasn't fun because a lot of them were really good. They're really good for a lot of aspects. I loved a lot of PSU's systems. I miss a lot of them. But like, and I will say this, like, as far as video game stories go, PSO2's is probably one of my favorites, like probably close to like my favorite of all time. But the thing about it is it was so good because it could be so epic that it ended. Like there's not an easy way to come back from killing the primordial falls. Like, yeah, we beat falls in our time, but we also went back in time before everything ever existed ever. And we found the primordial soup and we punched falls in there too. Like, how do you do that? Like, as far as stories go, you know?
Yeah. I don't know. I didn't like, I knew it was going to be different because I mean, anything that starts as an RPG, RPGs that were around back in the day, they've all gone through changes, you know? And I don't know. I just didn't think that I would learn this much about Phantasy Star realistically. Be able to see it from this viewpoint.
There's a lot when it comes to Phantasy Star. Like, there's a ton. I forgot about Phantasy Star Adventure and Phantasy Star Gaiden. But it was a lot of the same stuff. Like, it was a lot of the same things that you're used to seeing. So, not a whole lot changed there. If anything, it reminded me more of Final Fantasy back in the day than anything else. But yeah, and the thing is, like, funny part is we spent what 2 hours going in all this, if not longer. But like,
I think it was closer to 3.
Yeah,
there's more? Really?
There's still more to the Phantasy Star series that's been different.
Yo, I mean, like, maybe we can do a part 2.
Maybe one day. I'd be down to do a part 2, but like, I feel like we would have to do a deep dive in all of them. I think more so what we're going to probably do is we're going to play PSU for sure. And I'll show you that, like, you'll get into that and stuff like that. But like, it's a good time. It was a lot of fun. And you kind of see all the different stuff they show off in this. So yeah, there's so much to go over, man.
Another thing that's consistent is like the menu aesthetic, or like some of the UI aesthetic is very consistent. Even with this game that looks way different than the last one, like the thing that showed like their health and like their stats looked very similar to the other game.
Like episode 3 card revolution though. That episode 3 card revolution though goes wild.
This popped up immediately.
The episode 3 card revolution goes wild.
But yeah.
All right, well, that was fun. I had a good time talking about it.
Yeah.
I guess the overall story, the overall take here, guys, is that NGS is a new generation of Phantasy Star games. And though there are some things that are tied in together, you got to keep in mind there is so much more room for this game to grow. And I know some people, like, they get really irritated, because I get irritated too. And like when an old game, like a game ends and they start another one up, like, why can't they just do what they did the first time but different or but better?
Yeah.
It doesn't work like that. It never has worked like that. In a lot of cases, when it has worked like that, the next thought process is like, why? This is just the other game.
Yeah, it's just the same thing.
Of the previous game.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as a dev, like, you want to do things differently. Like, you want to make something new. Like, you want to build up. You want to try your new options out. Like, you want to evolve. So just take it with a grain of salt. Understand that, like, a few years from now, you're not even going to look like playing the same game anymore.
I mean, if you think about the changes we've had in the 2 years that NGS has existed.
Yeah, it's
like,
dramatically different already.
It's insane comparatively than a lot of MMOs that exist out there. Like, they don't see those types of changes like that fast, that often. We may not have the biggest regions, but we're in 2 years up to 4 regions, plus some weird floating things all over the sky, you know? So
yeah, like, there's a lot that can change.
Yeah, like, so it's going to be different. It'll be a different game. It's still building. And I think right now, like, the main thing is they're trying to get the core right.
And it's going to take a minute for that core is perfectly right, but it'll get there. It definitely will. And I know that if people haven't made this completely obvious, and I'll make it obvious now, base PSO2 is connected to NGS. It's already been said. It's already been confirmed. It's 1,000 years
Chapter 5 confirms that.
They Chapter 5 quite literally confirmed it to the T. Base PSO2 is connected to NGS. It's 1,000 years into the future. The Starless exist not because we got rid of Falls, but the Starless exist, and they're kind of like the new big bad that we have to deal with and all that stuff. So like it is connected no matter what. But it is still a new generation for PSO2, and that's exactly why they named it PSO2 New Genesis. It's a generation of a game. We're playing something else. So give it time. If you're not a huge fan of what it is right now, I mean, we can talk about how much it sucked at the start, like how little there was to do. But do you remember how many of us like did very little and enjoyed the hell out of it?
And we stood on the roof of that place in North Aleo all day long
for hours
and chatted and all day, literally all day. Or we ran around Aleo to get our alpha reactors because we didn't have nothing better to do.
Oh yeah, I didn't even mention Phantasy Star ES. PSO2 ES.
Oh, you told me some things about that game. Okay, can we take a side tangent? I know this video is very, very long at this point, and but I really want to take a little side tangent for you to talk about that, because everyone mentions it in passing, and I don't know what it is. And you've mentioned it kind of sort of in the same way, and I still don't know what it is.
Okay, so ES was a mobile game. And it was a mobile game in every sense of the word. Meaning it was gotcha, meaning you poured hours of time into it. And it was not friendly in the slightest. It was mean. It was an evil game that would take a lot of your money. But it was a companion game to Phantasy Star Online 2. And when I say companion game, as in you played the same character you had in PSO2. You connected the two of them together.
Oh, that's
so
cool.
you had an ES storage and you had a base game storage. And the thing was, there was also, you had the option of using that ES storage in base game. And there were certain items you could get specifically in ES that were usable in base game that actually helped out for certain things. Now, granted, this was only in JP because we never got ES in global.
Oh, really?
I mean, there were certain things that we never got a chance to try in global. It was only JP wise. But it was kind of like a tap simulator in a sense. Like you can see this person has their mouse on the screen. You're not gonna really be moving around a whole lot. What you would do is we swipe left, swipe right to kind of dodge left or dodge right, and then tap to attack. And then you had these chips down here that had specialized attacks. And that was mostly it. That was just how you played ES. It was very simplified. It was very, very easy. This is basically, if you've seen Monster Hunter Now, it was like what Monster Hunter Now is currently. But it was very, very, very rudimentary.
Wait, is it like Monster Hunter like right now, or like Monster Hunter Now is the name of the game?
It's the name of the game. It's Monster Hunter Now. It's the new mobile Monster Hunter game that came out. I'm not sure if you've seen it.
I've seen it. It's
more for everyone else, but like who's seen Monster Hunter Now, like the game itself. But like it's different. And yeah, Idla also exists. Yes, people are like, rip Idla, but Idla was a very standalone mobile game. It was kind of a throwback to the fantasy side of things. But it was also, what was the name of the game? If you ever played Brave Frontier or Fate Go or a lot of those other mobile games, actually you played Epic 7, right?
Mm-hmm. A lot. It was kind of
similar. It was a little similar to that, as you can see here. It went back to turn-based,
like sideways turn-based.
Yeah, it went back to the turn-based combat. It went back to like it was a throwback to old style Phantasy Star games.
Okay.
None of the same characters really existed outside of like collaborations. Like you can see Luther's here and things like that. There was like the whole,
oh my God, it looks like a mobile game.
Water. Yeah, it was a very mobile game. It was. It looks kind of like the meme of those really bad mobile games, but it was actually really fun. It was a really, really good game. We did get Idle on global, but there was not really much communication or combination with PSO2. But yeah, I mean, it was a good time. It was a good game. I wish we got ES on global, but that's because I wished. Let me put it this way: I wished we got ES on global because I was at a time that I could just spend money. I could definitely be a lot less. I could be a little more foolish with my money at the time. And we did, like I said, we did get Idle on global, and it was a good time, but it didn't really have a lot of communication with NGS, with PSO2 and things like that. So
yeah, I mean, as far as anything that we didn't talk about in this, like, if you guys did enjoy this, we can always do that again. Like, whether it be for like a special occasion or we hit a milestone or something, we can always do something like this again if Krono's okay with it, because he's the one teaching me.
Yeah, I mean, we can always do an in-depth of PSU, or we can always go back and like really explore PSOBB or Phantasy Star 1 or things like that. Like, we can play some of these games, so we can go back and kind of immerse ourselves into it, or we can kind of find some stuff. So we'll see. I'm definitely down to. Absolutely, this is a lot of fun.
Yeah, this was really interesting to learn all of this about Phantasy Star, and like to see how many of you guys like play the old games, because I know like some of you guys like rip on me for not playing base, or or surprised or whatever, but like that's really as far as we've gotten. And then like people mentioning PSU, but other than that, I just keep hearing the NGS isn't a real Phantasy Star game, and I never understood why, and I never understood the connections you guys had to these games.
Yeah, there's some pretty deep ones, and we spent a lot of time with a lot of these games.
Yeah,
a ton of time. Like, oh my God, my time with PSU, I will never forget that time. It was some of the best time in gaming, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, it makes me think, and like I said, I can understand a lot more now. I've mentioned before that I'm a Sonic fan. My favorite game of all time is Sonic Adventure 2. I like Sonic Adventure 2 more than Sonic Frontiers, and if you compare gameplay side to side, you will be like, you are what? What are you talking about? What do you mean you like it more? But it's like that nostalgia and like that feeling of like, I spent this time with this game. It's attached to these memories, and like you just love it, whether it's perfect or not. What is this?
It is a tier list for classes in base PSO2, and I want you to take a minute to understand that is Phantom, that's Luster, that's Hero, and that is my main 𝓤𝓐.
Why is your main at the bottom? You put it there?
Mm-hmm.
Oh no! Oh my goodness.
Because it was the truth.
Yeah, that's where he keeps his mains. I guess I'm E tier.
It was the truth. Oh hey, look at my old main. So maybe I'll piss off a bunch of other people by just including my little tier list. The first and last ever tier list I made for base PSO2.
This is my video, right? They're just gonna unsubscribe from me. Thanks, Krono.
Fine. They'll be fine. It's okay.
Yeah, so that's basically it. Like I said, if you guys did really enjoy this, like we could always do this again sometime. Like this was really, really fun. This was way more fun than I thought it would be. I knew I'd enjoy my time talking to you guys. I love Phantasy Star, and I only really know NGS. So like I knew I'd enjoy it, but this was awesome. And like I would love to dive into more of the side games and things like that aren't really like main installments or were just left out from this.
Yeah, I think you'd have a good time with Phantasy Star Portable and Portable to Infinity.
Yeah.
I think it would just make you laugh a lot.
And also subscribe to Krono or else...
No.
You will get 200% rare drop reduction. I can't even talk. Rare drop reduction in every game for the rest of your life.
Oh no. Don't lose the RDR.
So you have to.
You mentioned RDR being trapped back then too. Oh man, there are other things we can talk about, by the way. So yeah, you guys should definitely like the video if you want to see this again.
Okay, stay comfy, everyone.